the Iranians are here, they're spending money, the Europeans are absolutely delighted, and it's the Europeans that seem to have first mover advantage.
Natural, right?
Yep.
They're the ones that had a head start. Roughly 20% of Iran's trade was with Europe prior to the onset of the severe forms of sanctions in 2011. Just under 1% of Europe's trade bilateral was with Iran at that time. This has now collapsed to 0.2% of Europe's trade. So it'll be resumed and resumed quickly, particularly with contracts to companies that have had a head start or never left Iran.
So kind of, how does this, just compare and contrast the kind of the business relationship? United States, there's plenty of viewers watching right now who are sitting in the United States. There's plenty of sitting here watching in Europe. They're CEOs of companies. They want to invest. They are looking at the gap, the spread between US companies and European companies. How big is that spread?
It's quite large for the moment because US companies are really very reticent to touch Iran with a 10-foot pole because of the remaining sanctions that are trade-related, also financial sector-related, and obviously other sanctions that are still on related to Iran. And there is also the risk of the snapback provision. So I think US companies now are going to remain cautious for a while European companies will head there first. But I think that with time, US companies can make up the gap.
Where is the obvious play with cars, aeroplanes, this sort of stuff?
Yes.
Is that they'll make headlines? Is that where the real money is going to be made? Do you think?
Transport and logistics, so the Airbus order of 100 planes, oil and gas, which needs massive upgrading in Iran, but also other sectors, automotives, consumer-backed sectors. Iran is a huge and diversified consumer market. Now, what I would caution against is the figure of 50 billion in foreign direct investment coming into Iran in a year. That figure is being floated. It's an impressive figure. It's more than 5 times the amount that Saudi Arabia was receiving at the peak from international investors. But the figure is one thing, and Iran's absorptive capacity at the moment is another thing. And so we have yet to see how much Iran can absorb in the first few years.
One of the wrinkles that obviously, there's plenty of wrinkles in this region, and we're watching very carefully the situation in Syria. If we can get everybody around the table, if we can get progress, what's the dividend of that?
Well, this is where the rubber hits the road. One of the assumptions made by particularly the West, the international community, but particularly the West, was that doing a deal with Iran would produce some peace dividends regionally that would make it easier to get Iran to cooperate on some of the open conflicts in the region, Syria and Iraq being first amongst these. The question now is how easy is it going to be to do a deal on a playing field that's not level anymore? Because normally a third party can strike an agreement between 2 other parties if both are weakened. But over the past couple of months, the Russian intervention has tipped the scales again in favor of the Syrian regime, hence the back and forth over who gets to attend these talks in Geneva now. And hence, you know, the conditions that are being placed by those who are backing the Syrian regime, and hence the reticence of some of the opposition members in Syria to join these talks. The capture of the town in southern Syria from 2 days ago further rigs the scales against the opposition and in favor of the government. And there's quite a lot of momentum behind the initiative that was started in November, the roadmap, now 3 weeks of talks, etc. You know, this came from the momentum on the back of the Iran deal, and that's brilliant. The question is, how does one strike a deal between 2 parties that are no longer equally weakened since the Russian intervention?
Yeah, maybe you have to change that as well. Florence, we'll have to leave it there. Time beats. It's great to see you again. Nice to get your analysis.
My pleasure.
Florence Eid-Oakden, CEO and Chief Economist of Arabia Monitor. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.